Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with the head of the Jazz Studies Department at the New England Conservatory of Music, Ken Schaphorst. Since 2001, he has been in charge of the New England Conservatory's internationally renowned Jazz Studies Department, and now it is celebrating its 50th anniversary, showcasing the department's vibrant legacy and its place as one of the top jazz education programs in the world. A year-long celebration of Jazz 50 will include concerts and events in Boston, New York City, and Los Angeles, featuring many of the school's distinguished jazz alumni, faculty, students, and special guests. Ken talked about this, along with so much more related to his career and the state of jazz. So please get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
Ken, thank you for taking a minute for Neon Jazz today. I appreciate it.
No problem.
So you have to be the skipper of the biggest jazz ship on the ocean out there.
Well, definitely one of the bigger ones, one that's been around the longest, perhaps.
And I guess that will be the kind of the topic. I want to get a little bit of your history, and then first and foremost, though, I want to talk about the 50-year celebration. Kind of give me an idea of the celebration and how it came about.
Yeah, it's the 50th anniversary of the Jazz Studies program at New England Conservatory, and it just seemed like a great time to look back on that history. It was one of the first. It was the first of any kind that was fully accredited in a classical conservatory. So I think it's notable. Throughout the year, the academic year, we have some special concerts. We had a couple things in October in Boston, but the big ones coming up are during our spring break. We're having a couple shows at the Jazz Standard in New York City, and also a night featuring two big bands, one led by an alum named Darcy James Argue, a second big band that will be comprised of alums who currently live in the New York area. A lot of our alums do move there just historically and end up making their life there. It's close to Boston, of course. So we thought that would be a great place to celebrate.
So you've been with the program since 2001, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So talk to me a little bit about your involvement, what you've seen, how the program has grown since you've been up there.
Not only have I been teaching there since 2001, but I was a student at NEC between 1982 and 1984. And I lived in Boston about 9 years then. So I have a pretty good sense of that period as well. It has grown in numbers, that's for sure. But I think it's also grown in terms of curriculum. We keep developing new sort of areas of study. We have more larger faculty now and more ensembles. So, I would say it's grown in a number of areas.
It's interesting. The realm of jazz overall, when you look at all of music, it's seen as something that's not as popular as other genres. But all of the halls of all of these universities and colleges, like, for instance, in Kansas City, Bobby Watson has done an amazing job of transforming the Kansas City scene through a wonderful program that he's been involved with for decades. And I guess my question is this. There seems to be a polarizing thing that's going on in jazz. The actual scene, there's a lot of musicians that are really trying to fight their way to make a living wage. But you also have all of these college programs, wonderful programs like yours, that are doing so good at churning out all of these musicians and keeping the curricula up. How is that juxtaposition working? How do you think that works in your view?
It's a great question, and I do think we all need to think about that. What are these students going to do when they graduate? What kind of landscape are they going to face? I like to think that we're helping them prepare for that. That's something that I think all music schools are working on more and more. What we call at NEC entrepreneurship, basically teaching our students how to sort of develop their own career if there's no, job waiting for them after they graduate. I'm pretty optimistic. Over my almost 19 years now at NEC, I do see our students tend to go on and make a life in music. Not easy. I will say. I mean, it's the rare student who really kind of walks into the dream gig that they imagine and stick with that, for their whole career. Most of them have to do a variety of things to make a living. But they seem happy. I mean, at least maybe it's the ones I stay in touch with. But I try to stay in touch with them all. I guess I would say the training that they get, and maybe this is something I think about a lot, the training they get in learning to play jazz will serve them well no matter what kind of music they end up playing. So a lot of our students end up playing bluegrass or rock or, so much music today doesn't really fit into any one category. So it's some combination of a couple different styles of music. And I guess I'm reassured by the fact that I think our students can do all those things, and the training that they receive in jazz is so rigorous and so thorough that they're actually probably better trained for a variety of options like that than any other musician going to school today. I mean, that's my assertion.
But I think it's actually true. I've been fortunate enough to interview a number of musicians that have made it really big in rock and pop. For instance, Jimmy Chamberlain from the Smashing Pumpkins, he was originally trained in jazz, and now he's doing that. So I think that assertion is actually spot on, which I want to piggyback off of that notion and ask,
sure,
what is it about jazz that is so intricate, that it's such a more precise and intricate language that above all others, that trains these kids so well?
That's a good question. I would say part of it is ear training. I think you can't really play jazz unless you hear well. You can hear what the musicians in the ensemble are doing around you, because you are forced to interact with them in a very specific musical way. It only works if you can very quickly comprehend what's going on around you, adjust to it. So that's a big one. I think another thing is improvisation, and a very sort of specific kind of improvisation, where in a specific amount of time you have these sequences of harmonies, sometimes very complex harmonies, that you need to learn to navigate, and you need to mentally compose a line that's going to fit into that. And of course you're tapping into your intuition and your sort of instincts at the same time. I think those are things that will prepare students well for almost any kind of music. Most musics do have some improvisational element. Certainly rock and, pop music has that. I don't know, that's my theory. I do think, one of the recent examples that's been in my mind is there's a group called Lake Street Dive. They're sort of a pop, I don't know what to call a Motown group, and they're all former graduates of the jazz department. And if you heard them, you might not leave their concert thinking, oh, they're great jazz players. You might not know, actually. But I think that part of the reason that people are responding to their music is that musicianship really comes through. And, I'm proud to say they're jazz alums, even though the music that they're creating now as Lake Street Dive might not be, you might not find it in the jazz bins in your record store, if whatever record stores still exist. So I don't know. That's my brief take on that, anyway.
Yeah, no, and I love Lake Street Dive. They're actually done pretty well here in Kansas City. So yeah, I'm a big fan, and now that you say that, I can understand kind of the underpinnings of them being jazz oriented. What has been the most surprising things that you've seen over your time? And I asked you this in the vein of like developments in jazz, whether it's been musicians or an amalgamation of sound where jazz has gone in different directions. What's been the most surprising since 2001 that you've seen there?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot, but one thing that rises to the top is I started noticing when I'd go to recitals, and you see they're given a lot of freedom to construct their final senior, or for grad students, their second year master's recital based on, whatever they're interested in. So they play jazz, obviously, but so often I go to a recital, and then maybe at the end of the recital they'd sing a song. They'd say, okay, well, I love playing jazz, but I also write songs. Here's a song I wrote. And then we started a songwriting ensemble. when this started, but we have 26 small ensembles. Most of them are just playing music that, again, would be described as jazz by most people. That one maybe would not be, but it's incredible what I have heard over the years since it started. I do think that there's something, and maybe this goes back to your earlier question about jazz and its role in sort of education. These are creative people. They all tend to compose. They all tend to have ideas about sort of a new music that might include jazz in some new way. And I think songwriting is just a very natural way that maybe I wasn't anticipating would be a part of the jazz department. But I think, if anything, it's going to probably grow.
What do you like best about being an educator? What do you like best about giving the kids what you know, and what's the best part?
I mean, I enjoy watching them develop. And like I said, it goes beyond the, 4 years for undergrads or 2 years for masters. I do try to stay in touch with them, and it's just very interesting. And I actually taught for 10 years before I came to NEC in Wisconsin. So I've been doing this almost 30 years, and I have all these people, I guess, are out there kind of doing different things. And it's, you asked about what's surprising. I mean, it continually surprises me. These names pop up that I've almost forgotten about. And, I just got this gig here, and I don't know, that's sort of fun. And things that I would have never anticipated. So I don't know, maybe that's my favorite part. There's a lot, but that's I think that's one of my favorite things, just to hear what people are up to.
From the beginnings of this program in '69 to now, a lot has obviously changed, not only in jazz but in the world. Mm-hmm. Has NEC kept pace and even exceeded probably what expectations have been for a department of this stature?
We're working on it. I mean, I think things are changing so quickly, and to be honest, institutions kind of are slow to change. I mean, I get frustrated sometimes when I clearly see, this is a direction we need to go. And I'm kind of pushing in that direction, and yet, it takes some time. So I think we've done better than most institutions, if I could, give us what I think, we deserve. But I think we can always do better. I mean, I do think the music has changed. As you put it, the world, the business of music today has changed in ways, we could have never anticipated. We're certainly working on it. I'm very aware of those changes. And I think NEC is doing well. I guess I'll give us a B maybe, or a B plus if I had to give us a grade. But like I said, I'm always trying to do better.
You've been at the helm of probably a lot of shows and a lot of events in your association with NEC. Has there been one that's been magical, one that you just walked away from it thinking, wow, that was something I did not anticipate?
I mean, there have been many. So, yeah, that's interesting to think about one. I mean, there's maybe one. There's more than one, but maybe I'll try to limit it to one. But one of my favorite parts of being here was getting to work with some of my heroes. I mean, so many of these people, like Bob Brookmeyer and Steve Lacy, they're people whose records I bought when I was in high school trying to figure out how to play jazz. I would have never, ever dreamed that I'd meet them, much less, get to work with them. Yeah, there were a few times working with Bob Brookmeyer, maybe because he was a composer also, and I'm a composer. I felt kind of close to him in a way. He's from your area, by the way.
Yeah.
There were a few times where he just played a solo in a concert, and I was just, almost on the floor, blown away by, and this was the end of his life. He probably wasn't playing the valve trombone at the same level he once did, but so musical and so powerful. It was definitely a powerful one. We used to often do this piece called Cameo, where he just play over the changes to I Can't Get Started. And he had a beautiful arrangement that he wrote. It's really nothing but backgrounds. And he would just play a chorus, or maybe two, I kind of forget, of I Can't Get Started, but that was pretty consistently great. And I don't know, I could go on. And because I don't think he was playing that much, so sometimes he'd show up to the first rehearsal, and I could tell he hadn't really been playing the valve trombone too much. And I think, Bob, are you going to be ready? The concert's next week. I mean, consistently, he would just play the most perfect solo I think I've ever heard. It happened more than once, but I would say there was one in particular. It was probably the last time we performed together, and I just almost collapsed because of the, just unbelievable musicianship. So that's one.
Wonderful. The one thing that I get to hear from musicians on a regular basis is about all of these institutions, hallowed institutions they get to go to, whether it's NEC or it's Berkeley or it's Juilliard. There's all these schools. So my question to you is this. From the outside looking, and I have a notion of what these schools are like, but you're on the inside. Tell me what is like a defining characteristic of this program. What's the essence? What's the vibe? What's the feel of what this institution is all about?
Well, of course, I'm a little biased, and so take everything I say with a grain of salt, but I'm going to tell you what I think is the truth. I think it goes back to the beginning. The department started with Gunther Schuller as president. He was a sort of modernist classical musician who played French horn in orchestras, who loved jazz, played with Miles Davis on Birth of the Cool and some of the things with Gil Evans. So he had relationships with jazz musicians. He hired Jackie Byard, George Russell, some very innovative and yet, at the same time, sort of respectful towards the tradition artists who created, together with Gunther, I think a very interesting mix of, again, Gunther was very interested in playing Ellington's music, playing it exactly the way Ellington wrote it. I think he was one of the first people to do that, to approach the music like repertoire, almost like classical music. But at the same time, you had, Jackie Byard, who's playing with Mingus and doing some very new, original things, as was George Russell, not to mention George was a theorist. I would say balance between this tradition, which I think is very important in jazz, but also pushing people, students, towards, creating a new and sort of constantly evolving form of jazz. That's been at the essence. I mean, I think all the schools are probably doing that to some degree, but NEC has a sort of unique mix of that sort of balance, I guess. And I think it's still true. We have, Miguel Zenon and Jason Moran, the people today working at the conservatory who are, I think, are equally interested in all that, that sort of, sweet spot where all these approaches come together. So anyway, that's my sense.
It's a great triumphant way to kind of wrap everything up. Ken, thank you for taking a minute to talk about NEC, the 50th anniversary, and everything in between. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for asking.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in Boston, New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Ken for training the future of jazz for his time and his cool. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.